Hey everyone, my name is Penny Zanker, and it's time to reset. This podcast goes beyond just navigating change. It's about new ways of thinking about how you can approach challenges, how you can shift your mindset when needed, create some space and grace for yourself so that you can rethink, recharge, and reprioritize when and where needed. Are you ready to unlock your full potential? Thank you for hitting play and sharing this next episode with me. It's time to reset. Hello and welcome to Take Back Time. My name is Penny Zanker and I'm your host. And I'm searching high and low for people who are going to bring you some new ideas, some new ways to think about things. And today is no exception. We are going to be talking all reset today. I have Dr. Rebecca Homkes with me, and she is a high growth strategy specialist and CEO and executive advisor. She's a lecturer at the London Business School, faculty at Duke Corporate Executive Education, advisor at core faculty for Boston Consulting Group, and a former fellow at the London School of Economics Center for Economic Performance. So if you haven't gathered already, we've got a smart cookie here. She's also a best-selling author, and we're going to be talking about that book a little bit. Global keynote speaker and recognized thought leader. She's a global factory direct faculty, active learning program with YPO, the Young Presidents Organization, and the list goes on, but I'm going to just let her join us. So otherwise we'll be on here doing the introduction for another 10 minutes. So Rebecca, welcome to the show.
No, thank you so much for having me, Penny. It's my pleasure.
Yeah, I'm excited because we were just saying that I hunted you down on LinkedIn because I saw your book on Survive, Reset, and Thrive, eating breakthrough growth strategies at volatile times. And I think we can agree that we are in volatile times. Yes or yes?
We are in volatile times. The funny thing is, I was finding this thing this summer and early autumn where CEOs and leaders would be almost implying, well, we just need to wait until November, right? And then we can start making these decisions. And I always pried back, like, we're going to have perfect clarity in December. Come on now, right? We are in volatile times. We're going to be in volatile times. And I think we just need to embrace that. Uncertainty is the new certainty. So let's just get great, at leading our organizations and ourselves through these uncertain times.
That is so true. I mean, for those of you listening, how many people have that, well, I'll wait until when, ... You fill in the gap there in the dotted line. But I think it is when we're uncertain, we do tend to want to step back and wait and see what happens. And from your experience, why is that a mistake?
It's a mistake for a couple reasons, right? Is one, it actually goes back into a real thing that we've got to push against, which is how we frame uncertainty. And this goes into this whole reset mindset, which I know we're going to talk so much about. But if you just have conversations about uncertainty or listen for this, I find a very consistent pattern is we always put a word before uncertainty that means it's going to be bad. We ask each other, how are you and your team managing uncertainty? How are you going to overcome uncertainty? How are you going to waiting for uncertainty, right? We almost always preface it with a word that frames our brains, hey, this thing is bad, right? And if we just actually pause and define uncertainty, it actually has a definition, a very simple one. Uncertainty means a series of future events which may or may not occur. Whether or not those events are good or bad depends on what we're trying to do and how we're set up. So let's just take that on, figure out what we're trying to do, and then get set up. And if we always wait until what I call these artificial deadlines, right, until we'll magically know more, we're going to put ourselves, either our own careers or organizations, in these constant holding patterns. And that's very much against this performance growth mindset that we're trying to build.
Definitely. I love what you just said, because I never thought of it like that, right? It's how do we overcome the uncertainty or the challenges? Yeah. What's a good word to reframe that?
How are you taking advantage of this uncertainty? What cool things are you doing because of this uncertainty? When's the last time you heard that in a conversation? And that's just this reframe that I'm trying to constantly push against.
Well, so it's no wonder that there's so much resistance then, right? When a new change comes in, is because that's the way we've always been framing it. So we've actually conditioned our mindset to be in resistance. But it is a condition. It is a learned response. And the good thing is we can unlearn it and reprogram it, right?
Exactly right. This is the classic learning and unlearning, which goes into what we're trying to do in growth and performance. Is that you think about traditional strategies or performance planning, we actually treat uncertainty or change as risk. Right, as bad.
Mm.
Anything that goes counter to the plan, we have these big risk registers in the back that say, here's all the things that could go wrong. Basically, here's all the things that could change from the current situation. I always push back against boards and teams and say, well, where's your opportunity appendix? Where's the first appendix that says, here's all the opportunities we're not doing? It's just kind of that risk notion. And so it's reprogramming uncertainty is not negative, change is not bad, and that we control our own destiny as organizations and as leaders. And let's start embracing that mindset instead.
Yeah, I totally think that that's essential. That's sort of what I'm saying is these dynamic times call for dynamic approaches and a dynamic mindset, dynamic reassessment. So I know that you don't know about the reset mindset, but not having written a book around and using purposely the word reset, how would you define a reset mindset? And why do you think that's important today?
Yeah, well, I think why you and I connected is because of the power of the reset and frankly, how little is out there about its criticality. One of the reasons that came up with the phrase survive, reset, thrive was if you think about our post-COVID world or all of these big macro shocks from wars to surprise elections to interest rates, the constant theme or articles will always be don't just survive, thrive. You've got to survive to thrive. And if you look at that, it's like, well, that misses the fundamental ingredient to getting to thrive is resetting because the situation around us has changed. And that's where I really wanted to dive in because that's where we did not have guidance for leaders. We have plenty of books on recession playbooks. We have plenty of books on making strategy through certain times. We actually don't give people great guidance about, hey, the situation's changed. It's time to change too. And that's not bad. Every time we need to change our strategy doesn't mean we're going through a transformation or a turnaround or something we're doing is wrong. The most powerful resets from organizational strategies happen when things are going well. It's just the situation around us has changed and we need to grab onto those. So resets are these purposeful pauses, either because there's been an external shock or an internal shock. The situation's changed and we need to challenge the assumptions that we've made in our strategy and plans and then reset those assumptions for the changed world.
You probably didn't even know that that's like almost the exact language that I use. The purposeful pauses is exactly what I say. So we're definitely
yes.
In line there. And yeah, it's true that when we take those pauses to rethink things, that is definitely a positive move forward, even if it brings us to decide, hey, what we're doing is right. It's good. We can continue on this path, right? It doesn't always mean that we have to change, but
I'm so glad you mentioned that, Penny, because I think that's why we're resistant to the word reset, especially in organizational aspects. It's going to sound silly saying it to you who's an expert on resets, but one of the biggest questions I get from CEOs when they want to start on a new strategy is they'll say, Rebecca, we love Survive, Reset, Thrive. We've read the book, love it. We just have one request. Can we not use the word reset? I don't want to scare the board that things are going to change too much, and I don't want to disrupt the team. So they'll give me some options, Penny. They'll say, maybe we just use the word, review or reframe, or always joke like re-glance over, like what word do you want to use?
Right.
And I'm usually not a stickler for language, but I think there is power in saying we're going to reset. But, and this is a but, right? Not a yes and. Sometimes you don't change. But you've given yourself the confidence that we've reassessed our assumptions based on the situation around us. And now let's go forward again for the next midterm. But wow, do I feel better about that because I've now just tested all of my critical assumptions. So my challenge is use the word reset because you force yourself to look at those assumptions. And you know what? A lot of times you come out of it and say, great news. We've tested, we've updated. These priorities that we've set are still the right ones. Let's go execute some more.
Yeah, I am a stickler for language and I have chosen reset on purpose because of so many different reasons. But the element that's so important there that you said is to not just review, because review is maybe with the same lens that you've always reviewed it. A reset means to have a look at it and rethink it with fresh eyes, right? To know that the past is the past and it doesn't have to be the future, but it's really looking at things with fresh eyes and having that opportunity. So, and that's surprising to me that people rejected that language because I'm finding that people really like the language because when they call for a reset, it's a call for realignment.
Yeah.
And that might just be that we're not aligned around what it is, or we're not aligned around with what's changed in the marketplace, or depending on what it is, but I find that people, they want a reset, especially when it comes to the way that we're doing things aren't really working. So it feels like a relief for people to have that
Yeah,
word
I think
involved.
it absolutely can. And there's power when it does. What I've found is that depending on the structure of the organization, if you're a public or private company, what type of shareholders or board that you have, there's not a resistance to change necessarily, but there's this notion of let's go through the motions of reviewing, but I don't want to disrupt too much, right? And there's a real change management fatigue. If you think about what we put leaders through over the past 5 years, from COVID to wars in Europe and then across the Middle East to an election cycle that did not end, across pretty much every major democracy in the world, to constant fears about the economy is going to crash next quarter, which we've been telling people. We have been conditioning people, right, in organizations that to constantly kind of build this almost sense of urgency that we're in this kind of crisis moment. And there is kind of resistance to more of that. And so I think that's why we're going back to let's approach it with a mindset, right, of this purposeful pause. Not everything needs to change. But sometimes, again, giving yourself permission really matters. And look, Penny, we're looking at a lot of major companies who are going through these resets right now, from Nike to Boeing to Starbucks to Burberry. And it's actually very hopefully refreshing for other leaders to see. If these big storied brands can actually claim quite publicly, we're going to be resetting. Hopefully, that's giving permission for smaller organizations to do so as well.
Yeah, totally. So I talk about sort of the what happens intuitively when we reset. I talk about 3 steps about stepping back, getting perspective, and realigning. For you, are there some steps that you recommend as part of your approach to reset, or how do you approach that for leaders so that they can find these moments, what I call reset moments?
Well, the first is kind of when do you go into a reset, right? And if you think about a growth strategy, because again, the book is built on how you can lead growth and performance through these volatile times. A strategy, a 3-year time frame is really the sweet spot. You can come back to using the framework for your own career, but if we stick on the organization for just a minute, 3 years really is the sweet spot. So you say, well, we need to reset every 3 years or when the situation changes. And it's that second disciplining part that you've got to give yourself permission because when the situation changes, whether it's AI moving more quickly in your industry than you're expecting, losing a major investor or customer, we sometimes have this notion of, let me just get back on track, right? But we change or reset every 3 years or when the situation changes. And then it's asking 6 simple questions for your organization. And the questions are, what's going on? And how's it going to change? And what is success? So where are we going to play? How are we going to win? What could stop us? So what should we do? And sitting down with your team and revisiting those questions, starting with your beliefs, how has the situation changed? Then going to your right to win. Resets are most often triggered because an organization has lost competitive advantage or the change situation has made them realize that maybe they never had it. So the second question, you're going to reset or update your right to win. Then look at where to play. Where in the market do you want to compete as an organization? Define success and then your top priorities to get there. And I want to pause on that, Penny, because this is the biggest mistake organizations make. They say, hey, I'm going to reset my strategy. And they start by saying, hey, what do we want to do? And they make a new list of priorities. Now, that's the last step you make in a reset. You start with your beliefs. What is the situation? How's it going to change? The perspective that you were just talking about. And that becomes a foundation on which we make all those choices about where we want to go forward.
So I just want to clarify, because I said I am a word person. So you said about your beliefs, but really it's not only what you think and where you think you are. You need external data to see how are things changing, right? So when you say beliefs, is there something external about that as well? Or?
Yeah, and beliefs are a combination of external and internal. So you look at the major trends that are going on from a macro lens or industry-specific trends, political and regulatory trends, and also social trends. And then you also look at your own business model. If you think about your own value chain or how you deliver value as an organization, what are some key trends affecting things like, R&D or product development or people and culture? And of those most critical kind of big impact to the industry and super important to you trends, really being clear on your beliefs. And what I found is that when you see teams disagreeing on what they should do, their top priorities, it's almost always because they haven't taken the time to align in their critical beliefs. Now, data informs our beliefs, but data is just one input, right? Because data, of course, is historical. And so sometimes we need to set beliefs about how the world is going to move and change going forward, but knowing that beliefs are just helping us form hypotheses about what we should be doing. The real power move leaving a reset is I am, yes, executing my new set of research priorities, but I'm also stress testing my beliefs in the market, right? So while I'm executing, I'm being very heads up and looking at what's going on and constantly testing those beliefs. This is one of those big power moves. We call it parallel pathing, right? In parallel, I'm executing, but I'm also testing and making those updates and revisions and adjustments as I go.
Yeah. And yes, that's what I want to talk about because I call that dynamic reassessment.
Yeah.
Right. And I came from technology world. So like that's what we did. We
Yeah.
developed something and we iterated it, right? We tested it
Exactly. Yes.
and
Yeah.
we went back and fixed the
Mhm.
bugs and then we tested it some
Mhm.
more. And then when it was ready, it was put onto the marketplace. But then there was always feedback coming in and always things changing. And I think that's the essential piece today that wasn't as essential years ago because we had less changes going on and less things affecting the organization and forcing it to change than we have today, right? And
Mhm.
so we have to be listening and taking in that feedback and executing and testing all the time, whether it's internally or externally. I'd love to hear more about what types of strategies and methods you use to keep leaders and people present to that phase of execute and testing.
Yeah, so your first step of the reset is defining those most critical trends and then articulating your beliefs. And of those that are most critical, again, you're going into this testing phase, which can be active testing like customer interviews or surveys or putting explicit tests in the market. And all along the way, I'm bringing in that knowledge and learning and then updating my priorities as I go. And we want to push against the notion that once I've made a strategic plan, everything in it must get done. Now, strategies are hypotheses about the best way to grow based on our current understanding of the environment. That's going to update and change. And so you build actually practically what teams do is they build a belief tracker as well as a strategy tracker. Now, here's our top 10 or 12 beliefs, and I'm tracking whether or not those beliefs are still on track. And the cool slash different thing to embrace about a belief tracker is hey, it's going to be off track sometimes. Some of your beliefs aren't going to be tracking, and that's okay, right? Because they were all hypotheses about a changing situation. And the information we have about those beliefs is going to inform our priorities. And then one small micro change that I like to make in the review meetings is when you think about sitting down with your team to review strategy or progress, we tend to start those review meetings with a question. And that question is, are we on track to plan? Right? We like to start the meeting with that question. And I encourage teams to instead start that review meeting with the question, has the situation changed? Because we're framing ourselves from the beginning that the initial track we set may or may not have been the only track, and we're not making the assumption the situation hasn't changed. And this is how we build some of that reset mindset. We're giving ourselves permission from the beginning of the meeting to reevaluate what we're working on and possibly change things if we agree as a team the situation around us might have changed.
Yeah, that is really, really powerful, is to frame the meeting to assess with that clear alignment around has the situation changed? And
Yeah.
then the discussion changes.
Yeah.
So the one path is, are we on track? That's
Mhm.
going to have that meeting talk about key performance indicators and right how we're
Mhm.
doing on
Yeah.
those key numbers and actions that are happening. Where does the conversation go? Maybe give an example
Yeah.
of a client or a situation that you've worked with of where they started with, has the situation changed and how does that meeting go?
Well, sometimes the situation hasn't changed, right? And if the beliefs that you set kind of at the beginning of the year and you're at the halfway point, and those beliefs are all still affirming and tracking, let's pause on that. Then yes, go look at your key performance indicators or ideally your outcomes, and those should roughly be tracking, right?
Right. But let's say they didn't.
Which I know is what you really want to talk about. Let's
Yeah.
just be clear, right? For those people saying, hold on, hold on. Yes, if they didn't, then great. We say, okay, which of our beliefs have been challenged? Which of our priorities are linked to those beliefs? What do we
And I
not
want
know
to just
that we
reframe.
need
And
to
so
know?
you're saying
Yeah,
beliefs. What I heard you just say
yeah,
earlier that made me understand it better. And I want to
yeah,
make sure everybody who's listening understands
yeah,
that they're not like our personal value beliefs.
yeah,
These are the beliefs or the hypotheses that
yeah.
we've made about where our business is now and what we need to be doing to win. Is that right?
Yes, our key strategic beliefs. So let's take an
Right.
actual
I
example.
just wanted to reframe that for
Right. You
everybody
might have a
listening.
belief about how quickly your customers will embrace kind of AI communication versus in-person communication.
Gotcha.
You might have a belief about how quickly supply chains will normalize in certain regions of the world. You're going to have a belief about how quickly housing will come back if you're in commercial real estate, how quickly return to office. And we are making strategic beliefs all of the time.
Right.
The challenge is make them explicit rather than implicit, because then if we don't have them written down, a conversation about has the situation changed becomes a rambling, winding conversation, which no one is going to find productive. But if we say, hey, let's pull out our belief tracker, we have 10 beliefs. Wow, like 3 of them aren't really tracking. Which of our priorities are those linked to? And if you think about everything in the technology space, the sustainability space, I mean, macro wise, I could go through Penny kind of 10 or 12 trends right now. Companies in every industry are like, wow, like we've got a lot of our strategic priorities hinging on our beliefs on these. And so we've constantly got to be updating and testing those.
I was thrown off a little bit just by the word beliefs. Like I said, I kind of am a word geek or whatever. So these are our hypotheses. These are our assumptions of where things are going. So, okay, I'm clear. So let's come back to that meeting where you said, so we're checking in. We say things have changed. And the way we evaluate how that's changed, I'm understanding, is we go through that belief or assumption tracker to say which one of these has changed and how is that impacting how we're moving forward or the success that
AI is a big topic, but if you think about AI, like I was really seeing a very bifurcated set of beliefs about a year and a half ago. Many executives saying, hey, I don't want to be caught in the next thing. I don't want this to be the next blockchain or cryptocurrency where it doesn't lead to anything. Let's just wait and see. Where others went really hard, really fast, and frankly, overinvested, right? Because the technology was moving so quickly. If you overinvested too soon, 6 months later, what cost you 5 million might have cost you 500,000.
Right.
And so now we're looking back and we can actually really update and refine our beliefs and say, yes, AI is ready for customer facing in these areas, but still not these. But we believe it will be here in kind of the next 2 to 3 years in really refining some of those strategic beliefs. And why this stuff matters is goes back to something you said several minutes ago, which really struck me is people that want to do this. They want to reset. And yes, they do, Penny. If you talk about a growth mindset or reset mindset, everyone says, absolutely, that's what I want. And then they run into an organization whose structure and processes and systems in every single way push against that, right? And so if we really want to build these cultural aspects, we've got to put them in organizations, right, that have strategies built for change and growth mindsets. And I think that's a real missing link in a lot of organizations. We send people to growth mindset workshops and we preach the power of it, but everything in our strategic planning and performance management process rewards making a 3-year plan and sticking to it no matter what, which goes against the very notion of what these mindsets are.
Totally. And that's a little bit why I created this as a nuance. In my book, I compare the growth mindset and the reset mindset and build nuances on the growth mindset because it was originally talked about in 2006 when there was a lot less change that they were experiencing. So I wanted people to have the nuance that we need a growth mindset that's more adaptable, that we're not learning over time, we're learning as we go and adapting
as we execute. Yes.
So for you, and I know you haven't read the book, but I think that's exactly why I'm interested in your thoughts and opinions, is what would the difference for you be, the fundamental differences in the growth mindset and the reset mindset?
We're going back to kind of language matters, right? Is one thing, and it's going to sound overly simplistic, is that growth mindset, just like celebrate failure and experimentation, and frankly, just like agility and everything around the agile movement, has been so buzzworded and cliched. It's one of those everything, nothing words. It means everything, which means it really means nothing. Right. And we've made it to be kind of a growth mindset notion. Hey, I'm going to approach things with this learning mindset, which is awesome, right? And learning velocity absolutely matters. But we've really softened it over time. We can claim we have a growth mindset if I approach things with learning, but it's kind of gone away from, I think that's what you're applying to, Penny, where we're so aligned, from the notion that actually sometimes learning means I need to change and I need to learn how to change as well. So I think partly it's a softening, partly it's an overuse, and partly it's when we started that notion, it was very much associated with kind of leaning in and learning and adapting. But we've actually moved away from the notion that we've got to take these purposeful pauses, as you're talking about, and potentially make these changes and frankly give ourselves permission to. Changing something you're doing is not a reflection of poor performance. Changing something you're doing either as an organization or as an individual can often be the most powerful thing you do to reset performance going forward. And again, we need to build language that makes this permissible.
Absolutely. And actually, the benefit of it, right? Of doing what you talk about in execution and the testing and this dynamic reassessment is that we actually shorten our learning cycles so that we
Yes.
can integrate and actually grow faster.
If you're looking for where those critical learning loops are, right, then you can actually start to shorten them. And organizations that learn faster are those organizations that grow faster, right? The title of my next book is called Learn Faster, Grow Faster. And it goes through how we need to identify these critical learning loops, reduce the friction, and accelerate how quickly we go through them.
Love that. Can't wait till it comes out. We'll definitely have another discussion about it. So where can people find out more information about you?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a book website, surviveresetthrive.com, which has all the articles, videos, kind of podcasts you can dive into, or you can just go to RebeccaHomkes.com and link through to the book page. But two easy websites and have lots of materials for those who like to deep dive into different types of media.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for being here.
No, thank you so much for having me, Penny.
And thank you all as our listeners for being here, because this is exactly the time that you need to start building your reset mindset. If you're not already in that place, then you got some great tips today that I know you're going to be able to put into practice right away. And go spread the word. Have your colleagues listen to this talk and then get both of our books and really start to implement this in your organization so that you all are leading with the same mindset, sharing that same mindset and the same language. My name is Penny Zanker, and we'll see you in the next episode. Hey, thank you for spending this time with me. It really means a lot. If you're feeling a little off, distracted, overwhelmed, stuck, or just out of sync, remember that's your signal to reset. And that's all it takes, just recognizing one reset moment at a time. So stay tuned for more tips, tools, tricks, stories, strategies, all here on Time to Reset. We'll see you in the next episode.